The day I asked for a divorce, my wife, Colonel Evelyn Vance, had just gotten back from a field exercise. She was covered in dust, her combat uniform still impeccably creased, the silver eagle on each shoulder flashing under the kitchen light. She unbuckled her tactical belt and dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud, a sound that felt like a declaration of ownership. She didn't look at me. She just grabbed the bottle of Gatorade I'd left for her, twisted the cap off, and took a long pull. The muscles in her throat moved, a motion that was somehow both wild and sexy. "What's the drama this time, Sean?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Anyone watching would think I was cheating on you, that I cared more about my career than my own home." I didn't say a word. I just slid a piece of paper across the smooth granite countertop. It was a divorce petition. My signature was already at the bottom. Her hand froze in midair. Chapter 1 Sean, have you lost your mind? Evelyn's eyebrows knitted together. The same look that could make a rebellious private's knees buckle was now leveled at me, her eyes glinting like chips of ice. "I have the best ranger competition next week. Can you please, for once, just make my life a little easier?" That was us. I was her logistical support, the one who made her life easier so she could be the hero dedicating her life to her country. In 3 years of marriage, I had seen every version of her in uniform, looking powerful and untouchable. I was starting to forget what she looked like in an apron, her hands softened by dishwater instead of calloused by rifle grips. I met her gaze calmly. "I'm not throwing a tantrum, Ev. Look at the paper. It's a divorce petition. I've already signed it." My quiet resolve seemed to unnerve her more than any shouting match ever had. She finally gave me her full attention, her eyes scanning my face like she was assessing a new kind of threat. "The reason," she said. It wasn't a question. It was an order. "The reason," I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Last night, our son had a 104-degree fever. I was at the ER with him all night, running from one floor to another, try to hold him and my sanity together. Do you remember what you said when I called you? You're a grown man, Sean. You can't handle one sick kid? I have a critical briefing. Evelyn, he's your son too. My name is Sean Miller, and I'm a senior technician at Starkweather Industries. When Evelyn and I first got together, nobody saw it coming. She was the pride of Fort McKinley, the daughter of a general, the golden girl destined for greatness. I was just a guy from the other side of town whose parents were gone, a blue-collar worker who was good with his hands. Everyone said I was punching way above my weight, that I was the luckiest freeloader in the world. And I accepted it, because I loved her. I loved the way she smiled at me in her dress uniform, brighter than any star. To make sure she could shine in the Army without a single worry, I took care of everything. Groceries, cooking, parent-teacher conferences, even figuring out the best way to arrange her medals and commendations on the living room wall. But a heart can only take so much cold. The color drained from Evelyn's face. Her lips parted as if to say something, but in the end, she fell back on her standard defense. I'm a soldier. Following orders is my duty. Leo's fine now, isn't he? Yes, he's fine, I nodded, pushing the petition an inch closer to her. The paper made a soft, scraping sound on the countertop, like the sound of my heart being worn down over the years. So while everyone is fine, let's sign it. This will cause the least amount of disruption for you. You'll still be Colonel Vance, the officer with a limitless future. Panic finally flickered in her eyes. She grabbed my wrist, her grip shockingly strong, the bones grinding together. Sean, what the hell do you want from me? You're going to destroy our family over one little thing. There was a faint, silvery scar on her wrist. She'd gotten it years ago, pulling a kid out of a frozen lake one winter. At the time, I thought my wife was the greatest hero on earth. I wanted to be the one to soothe all her hurts, to be her unshakable home base. Now, that same hand gripping my arm felt alien and cold. I didn't pull away. I just used my free hand to cover hers, gently prying her fingers off one by one. It's not a little thing, Ev, and I'm not trying to destroy this family. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm done with this widowed marriage. I told her, my voice low and steady. The house, the savings. I don't want any of it. I just want my son. You've got to be kidding me, Evelyn snarled, shoving herself away from the counter so fast that her stool tipped over with a clatter. She looked like a cornered lioness, her chest heaving. I'm telling you right now, Sean, the only way we're getting a divorce is if I'm dead. And you are not taking Leo anywhere. The ferocity in her eyes was something I'd never seen directed at me. It was a bitter, funny thought. In her mind, I was no different from one of her insubordinate soldiers, someone to be suppressed with overwhelming force. The air in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. We stood in a standoff, two prisoners of our own making. Suddenly, the sharp ring of the red government-issued phone on the wall cut through the silence. Evelyn took a deep, shuddering breath, grabbing the receiver like it was a lifeline. Her voice instantly shifted, becoming crisp and authoritative. "Vance here." "Yes, sir. I'm on my way." She hung up and started for the door, not even glancing at me. She adjusted the collar of her uniform, smoothing out invisible wrinkles, as if our entire conversation had never happened. "I'm heading back to base. We'll talk about this after the competition. You need to cool down." The front door slammed shut. I sat there for a long time. Cool down. I've been cooling down for 3 years. I picked up a pen and traced my name on the divorce petition again, pressing so hard the ink nearly tore through the paper. On the counter, the Gatorade sheet half finished was sweating a ring of condensation. I picked it up and, without a moment's hesitation, poured it down the sink. Chapter 2, I moved out of the house and into one of the small, company-owned apartments that Starkweather kept for employees on temporary assignment. It wasn't much: a single bed, a desk, a dented metal locker, but it was quiet. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The only things I brought with me were a few changes of clothes and a photo of Leo from when he was 3 months old. In the picture, I'm holding him as he grins a gummy, toothless smile. Evelyn had missed that photo shoot, too. She'd been called away for an unexpected drill. At the plant, I was a lead engineer, the highest paid technician on the floor, but because of Evelyn's rank, I kept a low profile. My coworkers knew my wife was in the Army, but no one knew she was a colonel. I never talked about it, afraid of causing any trouble for her. "Daydreaming, Sean?" A bright voice broke my concentration. I turned. It was Chloe Hayes, a new engineer fresh out of college. She wore her hair in a practical ponytail, and her eyes were big and bright with curiosity. She was holding a blueprint, a hopeful smile on her face. "Sean, I think there's a problem with the gearing ratio on this drive shaft design. Can you take a look?" Chloe was a breath of fresh air in the stuffy, oil-scented world of the factory. She was bold, enthusiastic, and full of ideas. "With your skills," she'd often say, "you should be designing rockets for NASA, not just industrial machinery." I smiled, taking the blueprint from her and starting to explain the mechanics. For years, I'd put my own professional development on the back burner to manage the household. Now, diving back into the complex world of engineering, I felt like I was finding a part of myself I thought I had lost forever. A week went by without a single call or text from Evelyn. I figured she assumed this was just another one of my moods, and that I'd come crawling back in a few days. She'd always been confident to the point of arrogance. Then, one afternoon, while I was helping Chloe test a newly retrofitted CNC machine, our plant manager, Mr. Henderson, came jogging onto the floor, looking flustered. "Miller, Sean, you need to get to the front gate now. Your wife is here." The entire workshop fell silent. Dozens of pairs of eyes instantly swiveled in my direction. I frowned. What was Evelyn doing at the factory? I set down my wrench, wiped my greasy hands on a rag, and walked toward the entrance. In the distance, I could see a black Chevy Tahoe with government plates parked in front of Starkweather's aging main gate. The vehicle itself was an assertion of power. Evelyn stood beside it, wearing her crisp dress uniform, her posture as straight and unyielding as a flagpole. Her presence made everything around her seem faded and insignificant. A few workers walking by stared openly, whispering to each other. She had that effect on people. No matter where she was the center of gravity. I walked up to her. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice flat. Evelyn took off her service cap, revealing a face that was beautiful but devoid of expression. She looked like she'd lost weight. Her jaw was sharper, and there was a weariness in her eyes she couldn't quite hide. She didn't answer my question. Instead, her gaze drifted past me, landing on Chloe, who was watching us with a concerned look from a distance. "Who is she?" Evelyn's tone was accusatory. "She's my colleague," I said plainly. "Colleague?" She scoffed, her lips twisting into a sarcastic smile. "You learn fast, Sean. The moment I'm gone, You've already found my replacement. No wonder you were so eager to leave. Found someone more appreciative here in the factory, did you? Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for the nosy coworkers nearby to hear every word. I felt Chloe flinch behind me. A hot surge of anger went through me. This was Evelyn's way. She always knew exactly what to say to inflict the most damage, never considering for a moment that the problem might be her own. Evelyn, if you came here to make a scene, I'm not interested. I turned to leave. Halt, she barked, the single word ringing with military authority. I stopped but didn't turn around. Sean, her voice softened, taking on a pleading tone that was so rare for her, it was jarring. Come home. Leo misses you. Using our son as a bargaining chip. It was her classic move. I turned back to face her, my expression cold. I told you I want a divorce. If you want to talk, we can schedule a time to meet with a lawyer. If you want to cause a scene, I'll play along. But don't you dare bring this to my workplace, Evelyn. No one here gives a damn about your rank. Without waiting for a reply, I walked away, ignoring the look of shock and humiliation on her face as I headed back into the workshop. Behind me, there was a long, heavy silence. Finally, I heard the roar of the Tahoe's engine as it sped away, tires squealing on the asphalt. Chloe walked over, her voice hesitant. Sean, are you okay? Your wife, she... I'm fine. I shook my head, picking up the wrench and tightening a bolt. The tool made a sharp, definitive click. She's just someone who's about to be my ex-wife. Chloe gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with surprise. I didn't explain further. I poured all my focus back into my work. I knew this was just the beginning. The real war between me and Evelyn had just begun. That night, lying on the hard mattress in my apartment, I tossed and turned. I thought I would be devastated, but strangely, all I felt was a profound sense of calm. My hand brushed against something hard under my pillow. I pulled it out. It was a small whistle, fashioned from an old bullet casing. Evelyn had given it to me years ago. She'd said that if I ever blew it, no matter where she was, she would come for me. I used to treasure it. Now it just felt like a joke. I opened a drawer and tossed it into the back, burying it with old letters and photos I couldn't yet bring myself to throw away. Evelyn didn't show up at the factory again, but she wasn't finished. 2 days later, the plant manager, Mr. Henderson, a kind, gray-haired man who loved to pontificate at company meetings, called me into his office. Sean, he began, wringing his hands, his face a mask of discomfort. Is everything all right between you and Colonel Vance? My stomach dropped. She'd pulled strings. Sir, that's a personal matter, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I know, and I don't want to get involved in your private life, he sighed, pouring me a cup of coffee. But yesterday, I got a call from a General Peterson at the Pentagon. He was asking about you, and he also made a point of inquiring about our new engineer, Chloe Hayes. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Evelyn, she had actually used her connections to pressure my boss. She had investigated Chloe. General Peterson mentioned that as a military spouse, your conduct reflects on the armed forces. Henderson continued, watching my reaction carefully. Sean, I know you're a good man. You're our best technician, a solid guy. But Colonel Vance, she's a colonel. If you two have a problem, you need to solve it quietly. Don't let it impact her career. The message was clear. It was a warning disguised as concern. In their eyes, Evelyn's career was far more important than my dignity or my pain. I was the one who had to be managed, the one who had to sacrifice for the greater good. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Henderson, I said, standing up. My voice was calm, but my insides were churning. My decision hasn't changed. If my personal life causes any problems for this company, I'm prepared to accept the consequences. Walking out of his office, I felt a fire ignite in my chest. Did you really think you could make me submit with a show of force? Evelyn, you're wrong. The more you push, the more certain I am that I have to leave you. That afternoon, Chloe found me. Her eyes were red. Sean, she said, her voice thick with tears. HR called me in for a meeting today. They asked me all these questions. About you. They told me to be mindful of my conduct and warned me about fraternization that could be seen as damaging to a military marriage. In the ecosystem of the military, an accusation of adultery, even a baseless one, could destroy a young woman's reputation and career before it even started, especially at a defense contractor. Looking at Chloe's tear-streaked face, I was filled with a potent mix of guilt and rage. I'm so sorry, Chloe. This is my fault. I drag you into this. No, it's not you, she insisted, stubbornly wiping her eyes. I'm just so angry. How can they just accuse people like that without any proof? Your wife? She's gone too far. I'll handle it, I promised, looking her in the eye. I will not let you get hurt because of me. That evening, for the first time in weeks, I called the house on the base. Evelyn answered. Hello. Her voice was as cool as ever, but I thought I detected a flicker of hope. Evelyn. My voice was ice. Did you have Chloe investigated? Silence on the other end. Did you have a general call my boss? I pressed on, each word tight with fury. In your world, is there any problem you can't solve by pulling rank? Does everyone just have to bend to your will? She started, trying to find a defense. I was just trying to understand the situation. Understand the situation? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Did you ever try to understand how helpless I felt at the hospital with Leo, with no one to call? Did you ever try to understand the pressure I was under, dealing with all the whispers and rumors because my wife was never around? No, you only understand your missions, your competitions, your career. Sean, does it have to be like this? Her voice hardened. Everything I do it to build a better life for this family. This family, I repeated the words, the irony choking me. Am I in it? Is Leo in it? Or is family just another medal you pin to your perfect service record? I could hear her sharp intake of breath. I knew my words had hit their mark. Evelyn, this is the last time I'm going to say this, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. Come after me, and I'll face you. But if you dare to touch the people around me, I swear to God, I will burn everything to the ground. I slammed the phone down. The apartment was deathly quiet. I stared out the window into the black night, feeling for the first time a complete and utter despair about our future. I had no way of knowing that on the other end of the line, Evelyn was still clutching the receiver. On her desk was a freshly printed award citation for winning the Best Ranger competition. The red ink of the official seal was glaring. But she felt no joy, only a deep, penetrating cold that started in her bones. Her aide knocked and entered, stopping short when he saw her face. Colonel, are you all right, ma'am? You look pale. Evelyn waved him away, her voice hoarse. Book me a flight back to Pittsburgh. First one tomorrow morning. The next day, a black government SUV once again parked outside the factory. This time, Evelyn didn't come in. She sent a security guard to the gate with a note for me. Her sharp, decisive handwriting filled the small page. I'm at the Steel Skillet Diner down the street. Please. I hesitated, then decided to go. Some things needed to be said face to face. When I arrived, she had already ordered a full spread of comfort food, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans, all my favorites. She wasn't wearing her uniform, but a simple blue sundress. With her long hair down, she looked less like a commander and more like a woman. She watched me sit down, then ladled some soup into a bowl for me. Have some soup first. I know you get an upset stomach when you're stressed. The sudden gentleness was disorienting. In 3 years of marriage, I couldn't remember her ever serving me first. Just say what you came to say, I said, leaving my silverware on the table. Evelyn watched me for a long moment before speaking. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Investigating your friend, calling your boss. I was wrong. I was stunned. I never thought I'd hear those words from her. An apology from Evelyn Vance was rarer than a blizzard in July. I was scared you were really gone, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You wouldn't answer my calls. I came home, and the house was cold and empty. I didn't know how to get you back, other than using the tools I had. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and the usual sharpness was gone, replaced by a vulnerable shimmer. I have to admit, for a second, my heart softened. This woman, she just didn't know any other way. She used aggression and authority to hide every other emotion. She was a fortress, walled off and defended, with all her softness locked deep inside. But then I remembered Leo's feverish face, Chloe's tear-filled eyes, and Mr. Henderson's worried warnings. Softness was a luxury I couldn't afford. Evelyn, I said, meeting her gaze, if sorry was enough, we wouldn't need divorce lawyers. The color drained from her face as if I'd slapped her. Do you have to be so cruel? She whispered, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the table. "I'm not the one who was cruel," I said calmly. "You were. With every broken promise, every time you took me for granted, every time you used your power to remind me of my own powerlessness. You're the one who pushed us to this point." I stood up. "I can't eat this. My position hasn't changed. Good luck, Evelyn." I walked out of the diner and didn't look back. I was afraid if I saw her face one more time, my resolve would crumble. Back at the factory, I threw myself into my work. Only the roar of the machines could quiet the chaos in my head. That evening, Chloe handed me a Tupperware container. "Sean, I saw you skip lunch. I brought you something." Inside was rice and stir-fried vegetables. Simple, homemade food. "Thank you," I said, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Sean," Chloe began hesitantly, "your wife. Do you think she's having second thoughts?" I shoveled rice into my mouth, saying nothing. Second thoughts? Maybe. But in this world, some things just can't be undone. Over the next few days, the gossip at the factory died down. I knew Evelyn must have done something to call off the dogs. For all her faults, she was a woman of her word. That weekend, I went back to the house on base to see Leo. My mother-in-law opened the door. She looked startled, then quickly pasted on a strained smile. "Sean, you're here. Come in, come in." The house was spotless. Even the spider plants I'd left to die on the porch had been watered and were showing new life. Evelyn was in the kitchen, wearing an apron. When she heard my voice, she peeked out. A look of nervous surprise crossed her face. You're back. Dinner's almost ready." Her hair was tied up messily, and a smudge of flour was on her cheek. It was almost comical, but it was also domestic. It was an Evelyn I had never seen before. Leo came running out of his room and latched onto my leg. "Daddy, you're back. Mommy said you were on a business trip." I stroked his hair, a lump forming in my throat. Dinner was awkward. My mother-in-law kept piling food on my plate, praising Evelyn. "Our Ev is really learning, isn't she? She's even started cooking." "Sean, you know how it is. Every couple argues. You just have to learn to forgive and forget." Evelyn kept her head down, quietly eating and sneaking glances at me like a guilty child. She even peeled a shrimp and put it in my bowl. She herself was allergic to shellfish and never touched it. I stared at the shrimp, a storm of emotions churning inside me. If only she had done this sooner. Any of this. But now, it all felt like a carefully staged performance, a desperate play to win me back. After dinner, my mother-in-law made an excuse to take Leo for a walk, leaving Evelyn and me alone. "Sean," she said, standing up. She pulled a document from a drawer and handed it to me. "Look at this." I took it. It was a transfer request. The applicant was Colonel Evelyn Vance. The requested position was Deputy Director of the Regional National Guard Liaison Office. It was a 9-to-5 desk job, a world away from a field command, a career dead end. I looked up at her, stunned. "I already submitted it," she said, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't read. "Command is still considering it. But if you want me to, I'll fight for it. I'll be home every night. I'll cook for you and Leo." Her right hand unconsciously went to the back of her ear, a nervous habit I'd only recently noticed. I stared at her, my mind reeling. To keep me, she was willing to sacrifice the career that was her entire life? Was this the same Evelyn Vance who believed duty and ambition were more important than anything else? I was silent, staring at the transfer request. For Evelyn, giving up a command position to become a paper pusher was the equivalent of professional suicide. I knew how much blood and sweat she had poured into getting where she was. Her entire identity was built on honor, courage, and commitment to the Army. Now, she was offering to throw it all away for me. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. "Why?" I finally managed to ask, my voice hoarse. "There is no why," she said, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I used to think putting on a uniform meant my only duty was to my country. Now I realize you can't serve your country if you can't even serve your own family." She looked up, her eyes boring into mine. "Sean, you are my most important mission. I screwed up. I failed to secure my objective. I lost you." Her military metaphors were clumsy, but her sincerity was undeniable. I looked for any sign that this was just another tactic, another strategy, but I found none. The regret in her eyes was real. If her apology at the diner was a calculated move, this transfer request was an unconditional surrender, with her entire future on the line. My resolve began to fracture. "So that's what our marriage is to you?" I asked. "A mission objective? A position to be defended?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "It is. I thought that if I eliminated all the external threats, the position would be secure. I never realized that the ground underneath was eroding the whole time." Again, it sounded like an after-action report, but I understood what she meant. The room fell silent once more. I gently pushed the transfer request back across the table toward her. The color drained from Evelyn's face. She swayed slightly, as if all the strength had gone out of her. You still won't stay." Her voice trembled with despair. "That's not what I mean." I looked at her, choosing my words carefully. "Evelyn, I don't need you to give up your career to prove you love me. I fell in love with you because of who you are, the brilliant, driven soldier in that uniform. If you became someone else for my sake, you wouldn't be the woman I fell in love with. I never wanted a housewife." I took a deep breath, finally saying the words that had been buried in my heart for years. I wanted a partner, a wife who, when I called her from ER with our sick son, would say, "Don't worry, I'm on my way." I wanted the Evelyn who understood that home wasn't just a place to store her gear. "I don't want you to give up the sky." I finished, my voice raw. "I just want you to remember, while you're flying, that Leo and I are on the ground, waiting for you." After I said it, I felt completely drained. Evelyn just stared at me. Then, without warning, huge, silent tears began to roll down her cheeks. She didn't make a sound, just wept, her shoulders shaking. She was the unbreakable Colonel Vance, the woman of iron. I'd seen her bleed, seen her exhausted, but I had never, ever seen her cry. But here she was, in front of me, looking utterly broken and lost. The wall of ice around my heart finally cracked. I stepped forward and, as if moved by some force outside myself, reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Her skin was hot, but the tear was cold. "Don't cry," I said, my voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "You'll mess up your makeup." She wasn't even wearing any. She looked at me, a choked sob turning into a watery laugh. And with that laugh, it felt like spring had finally arrived after a long, brutal winter. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I stayed. We slept in separate rooms. Lying in the guest bed, I stared at the ceiling all night, replaying the image of Evelyn crying over and over in my mind. Was I really going to give up on this woman, who was finally learning how to find her way home? The next morning, I came out of the room to find Evelyn in the kitchen. She had made breakfast: oatmeal, boiled eggs, and a plate of slightly burnt pancakes. She was wearing an old floral apron I'd bought her as a joke, and the morning sun streaming through the window softened her features. "I asked the mess hall sergeant for his pancake recipe," she said with an embarrassed smile. A small red mark on her cheek showed where she'd been hit by spattering oil. Looking at this powerful, competent woman trying so clumsily to win me back, something inside me finally gave way. "Evelyn," I said, pulling out a chair, "withdraw that transfer request." Her hand, holding a bowl of oatmeal, froze. I picked up one of the burnt pancakes and took a bite. It was crispy and tasted of smoke. "And from now on, let me do the cooking. You're wasting oil." Evelyn looked at me, and her eyes began to shine, like stars reigniting in a dark sky. You forgive me." I didn't answer. I just peeled an egg and placed it in her bowl. Chapter 6, I didn't move back in right away, staying at the company apartment. My relationship with Evelyn entered a strange new phase. We didn't talk about the divorce, but we didn't go back to the way things were. It was a probationary period. I was observing her and trying to understand my own heart. Evelyn really was changing. She withdrew the transfer request, but it was clear her priorities had shifted. She was no longer gone for days on end. If she had to work late, she called. On weekends, she cleared her schedule to spend time with us, clumsily trying to learn how to be a wife and mother. She started taking Leo to the park. She read him bedtime stories, though her choices were still limited to tales of Sergeant Alvin York and the Apollo astronauts, which usually left Leo looking more confused than sleepy. She even started to take an interest in my world. One evening, she came to pick me up from work. Instead of waiting in the car, she put on a hard hat and a pair of safety glasses and came onto the factory floor. At the time, I was working on a new piece of German machinery. It was incredibly complex, and the manuals were entirely in German. Our entire engineering team had been struggling with it for 2 weeks. Evelyn stood at a distance, just watching. She watched me, covered in grease, navigating a maze of wires and gears. She watched me poring over blueprints, frowning one moment and lost in thought the next. When I finally solved the critical problem and straightened up, covered in sweat, I saw her there. "What are you doing in here?" I asked, surprised. She walked over and handed me a clean rag. There was a look in her eyes I had never seen before, a mixture of respect and concern. "I always thought your job was just tightening bolts and hitting things with a hammer," she said softly. "I never realized that your world, like mine, requires its own kind of courage and strategy." In that moment, I felt a wave of relief. For the first time, I felt truly seen by her. The ice between us was melting bit by bit. Meanwhile, Chloe and I remained good friends and colleagues. She was a smart woman and saw the shift in my life. She was genuinely happy for me. "Your wife is a hero, Sean," she told me with a smile. "But so are you. You two belong together." I was grateful for her. During the worst time in my life, her friendship had been a light, showing me that kindness still existed. We never went down a different path, but I would never forget her warmth. One day, I was deep in the final, most difficult programming phase for the German machine when my phone rang. It was from Evelyn's unit. It was her aide, his voice frantic. "Mr. Miller, it's the Colonel. There's been an accident." My mind went blank. The blueprints in my hand scattered across the floor. What happened to her? The Colonel's team was deployed for flash flood rescue operations in West Virginia. There was a mudslide. We lost contact. The world tilted on its axis, and all sound faded away. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted out of the factory, flagged down a passing truck, and yelled at the driver to take me toward the disaster area. My mind was a terrifying void, filled with a single, repeating prayer. "Evelyn, you have to be okay. You promised. You promised you would come home." Our reconciliation had just begun. I had started to see a glimmer of hope. She couldn't break her promise now. It was only then, with terror clawing at my throat, that I realized I had never truly wanted to leave her. All my anger, all my coldness. It was just a desperate, clumsy attempt to punish her, to make her finally see me. I was so scared. Scared that my tests and my ultimatums would curdle into a lifetime of regret. Scared that I would never again see the woman in uniform who knew how to smile at me and who tried, so terribly, to make me pancakes. Chapter 7. When I finally reached the site of the mudslide, the scene stopped me cold. The sky was a bruised gray, and a relentless rain was falling. A peaceful mountain valley had been transformed into a nightmare landscape. A torrent of thick, brown mud, carrying shattered trees and massive boulders, had ripped a raw wound through the earth, swallowing roads and homes. The air smelled of wet dirt and despair. Rescue workers in bright orange gear moved through the muck, their calls echoing in the rain. The sounds of search dogs barking, survivors weeping, and commanders shouting orders blended into a symphony of tragedy. I charged toward the restricted area, my mind gone blank with panic, but 2 young soldiers blocked my path. "Sir, it's too dangerous. You can't go in there." "I'm looking for my wife, Colonel Vance," I yelled, my voice cracking. The soldiers looked at each other, then back at me with dawning recognition. "You Mr. Miller? Where is she? Is she okay?" I grabbed one of their arms, my grip desperate. The young soldier's eyes turned red, and he looked down. "The Colonel. She went in to rescue a little girl trapped in a house." There was a second slide. It took the whole structure. We're still searching." My world imploded. I shoved past them, a wild animal driven by pure instinct, and plunged into the disaster zone. The cold, thick mud instantly sucked at my legs, but I didn't feel it. There was only one thought in my head. I have to find her. "Evelyn, Evelyn, answer me. You liar. You promised me. Evelyn." I screamed until my throat was raw, clawing at the mud with my bare hands. My nails bent backward, my fingers bled, but I felt nothing. Other soldiers rushed over, trying to pull me back. "Sir, you have to calm down. Get off me. Let me go." I fought them with a strength I didn't know I possessed. And then a weak, hoarse voice cut through the noise. It came from the wreckage of a collapsed barn nearby. "Sean." My entire body went rigid. I whipped my head around. The search team heard it too and immediately converged on the spot. There, under a massive, splintered beam, was Evelyn. She was half buried in mud, her uniform torn and caked with filth. Her face was a mess of cuts and bruises. Cradled in her arms, protected by her body, was a crying little girl. Evelyn's left leg was pinned beneath a huge concrete slab, twisted at an unnatural, horrific angle. "Evelyn!" I scrambled through the mud and fell to my knees beside her. She saw me and tried to smile, but the movement pulled at a cut on her face, and she winced in pain. What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's not safe. Go back." "I came to take you home," I said, grabbing her cold, muddy hand. Rain and tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision. "I came to take Leo's mom home." A light flickered in her eyes, then dimmed. She glanced down at her trapped leg and gave a bitter laugh. "My leg, I think. It's gone." "No, it's not." I shook my head frantically. "You're Evelyn Vance. You're invincible. You're going to be fine." The rescue team worked with frantic urgency, and finally, using heavy equipment, they managed to lift the concrete slab. When her leg was exposed, a collective gasp went through the crowd. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, willing myself not to break down. Medics rushed in, providing emergency treatment before loading her onto a stretcher. As they carried her past me, she used the last of her strength to grab the hem of my jacket. She looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt, love, and a strange sense of relief. "Sean, if I can't walk again, that divorce petition, just sign it. Don't let a cripple drag you down." Then her eyes rolled back, and she passed out. I stood there, frozen, as the cold rain soaked me to the bone. "Drag me down? Evelyn, you incredible fool. You were never a burden. You are my pride. You are, and always will be, the only thing in this world worth fighting for." Chapter 8. Evelyn was airlifted to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The red light above the operating room door stayed on for 8 hours. I stood outside, as still as a statue, her last words echoing in my head. "Don't let cripple drag you down." My heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. Her parents arrived, frantic with worry. A rotating cast of high-ranking officers came to offer support and manage the situation. I didn't hear a word they said. My entire universe had shrunk to that glaring red light. Just before dawn, the door finally opened. The lead surgeon emerged, pulling off his mask, his face etched with exhaustion. We swarmed him. "Doctor, how is my daughter?" Evelyn's mother asked, her voice trembling. The surgeon looked at us, his expression grave. "We saved her life, but her left leg suffered catastrophic damage. The bones were shattered, and there was severe nerve and vascular trauma. We did everything we could, but it's highly unlikely she will ever walk normally again." I had been expecting it, but hearing the official verdict made the world spin. Evelyn, the woman who could run for miles with a full pack. The officer who led from the front, whose physical prowess was legendary. Her career as a soldier was over. For her, that was a fate worse than death. I looked through the window into her recovery room. She was pale as a sheet, hooked up to a dozen machines. Her left leg, encased in a massive cast, was elevated in a sling. She looked like a fallen eagle, her wings broken, never to soar again. The pain in my chest was so sharp it felt like my heart was tearing in two. In the days that followed, I took a leave of absence from work and never left her side. When Evelyn woke up, she refused to speak. She didn't cry or rage. She just stared at the ceiling with empty, hollow eyes. She had retreated into a dark, silent place where no one could reach her. I bathed her, fed her, and massaged her good leg to keep the muscles from atrophying. I told her stories about when we first met, how I saw her across a crowded room in her dress blues and thought she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I told her about Leo's latest drawing, a picture of a superhero in a cape. "That's Mommy," he had said. She remained unresponsive. Her eyes were vacant, lifeless. Then one day, as I was peeling an apple for her, she finally spoke. Her voice was a dry, rasping whisper. "Bring me the divorce papers." My hand slipped, the peeler slicing deep into my thumb. Blood welled up instantly. I ignored it, looking up to meet her gaze. "Say that again," I said, She turned her head, her empty eyes finally focusing on me with a chilling intensity. We're getting a divorce. I will not spend the rest of my life living on a man's pity. Her face was set with a fierce, almost cruel pride. She was still Evelyn Vance. Even at rock bottom, she refused to be seen as weak. I started to laugh. I stood up, walked to her bedside, and leaned down, looking directly into her eyes. Evelyn, listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice quiet but firm. First, the only woman for me in this life is you. You want a divorce. You'll have to wait until I'm dead. Second, I held up my bleeding thumb in front of her face. You can take your pathetic pride and shove it. I'm not taking care of you out of pity. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you tomorrow. And third, I leaned in closer, whispering so only she could hear, the night you saved me from getting my ass kicked by 3 thugs behind a bar, I swore to myself that my life was yours. You think you can just back out of that deal now? Not a chance. Evelyn's body began to tremble violently. She bit her lip, trying to hold back the sobs, but the tears came anyway, a torrential, unstoppable flood that soaked her pillow. All her walls, all her defenses came crashing down. I gently wrapped my arms around her, holding her as she shook, patting her back like she was a little girl who'd scraped her knee. It's okay, I whispered. Let it all out. From now on, I'll be your leg. Anywhere you want to go, I'll carry you. She finally broke, collapsing against my chest and crying with an animal grief. Her sobs were filled with pain, rage, and despair. But underneath it all was the sound of release. I held her tight. My Evelyn was back. Chapter 9. Evelyn's recovery was a long and brutal journey. Every physical therapy session was a new kind of hell. The body that had once been a finely tuned weapon now betrayed her at every turn. Just lifting her leg an inch sent waves of agony through her. She wanted to give up 100 times. But I was there for every tear, every scream of frustration, pushing her, encouraging her, refusing to let her quit. I knew the physical wounds would heal, but the wound to her spirit was far deeper. Her biggest obstacle was the loss of her identity as a soldier. Her injuries meant she would be medically discharged. That was the blow she couldn't seem to recover from. She would spend hours just staring out the hospital window, lost in a silent grief. I had to do something. I went back to the factory, not to work, but to borrow the workshop. For 3 days and 3 nights, I locked myself in. I consulted every textbook I could find, filled a notebook with sketches and calculations, and poured every ounce of my knowledge and skill into a single project. When I returned to the hospital, exhausted and grimy, carrying a strange-looking metal contraption, the nurses stared at me like I was crazy. "Sean, what is that?" Evelyn asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. I didn't answer. I knelt beside her bed and carefully began fitting the device to her injured leg. It was a custom-built, articulated exoskeleton brace, designed using principles of mechanical engineering and human ergonomics. It was crude, heavy, and frankly ugly. But when I finished, I stood up and held my hand out to her, my gaze unwavering. "Evelyn, trust me. Stand up. Just try." She looked from a brace to my outstretched hand, her eyes filled with doubt. But with my encouragement, she gritted her teeth, pushed herself up with her arms, and, trembling, put weight on her leg. Everyone in the room held their breath. She was standing, she was wobbly, and she needed me to steady her, but she was standing on her own 2 feet. In that moment, Evelyn looked at me, her face streaming with tears. "Sean, I told you I would be your leg," I said with a smile, though my own eyes were burning. "This is just the prototype. I'll make it lighter, smarter, more efficient. I'm going to make you run again." From that day on, everything changed. The light returned to Evelyn's eyes. She attacked her physical therapy with the same ferocity she used to attack her missions. The brace became a part of her. She wore it every day, progressing from tentative, painful steps to a slow, steady walk. And I became a permanent fixture in her hospital room. I set up a small workbench in the corner, and every day I was there, tinkering, refining, and improving the design. Word of my invention spread through the military grapevine. The story of the decorated colonel and her engineer husband who built her a real-life Iron Man suit became something of a legend. The old rumors about me being a freeloader vanished overnight. replaced by whispers of awe and respect. It culminated in a visit from the commanding general of the entire medical command. He shook my hand, his eyes shining with excitement. "Mr. Miller, you're not just Colonel Vance's husband. You're a national asset, this device." The implications are staggering. Right then and there, the general greenlit a new research and development project, with me at the head, to perfect the exoskeleton brace for use by all wounded soldiers. I looked at Evelyn, who was staring at me with a look of absolute, shining pride. I nodded my assent. Our lives were about to begin a new chapter. On the day she was discharged, the sun was shining. Evelyn refused the wheelchair. Wearing the third-generation brace and a brand-new dress uniform, she walked out of the hospital. Her gait was still slow, but every step was firm and resolute. She walked up to me and straightened my collar, her eyes full of a deep, quiet love. "Mr. Miller," she said, a playful glint in her eye, using the formal title the Army had given me. "It's an honor to serve with you." I smiled and took her hand. "Director Vance," I replied, using her new title as the incoming Deputy Director of the Wounded Warrior Program. "The honor is all mine." We looked at each other and smiled. All the pain, all the hardship had melted away, leaving only this perfect, peaceful moment. Chapter 10. 1 year later. Department of Veterans Affairs, Washington, D.C. Evelyn sat behind a large desk, confidently signing off on a stack of documents. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, glinting off the silver eagle on her shoulder. Her leg had healed remarkably. She couldn't run marathons, but she walked without a limp. The brace I designed for her, now in its 5th generation after extensive development by military engineers, had not only been issued to thousands of wounded veterans, but had also won a national award for technological innovation. And I was no longer a factory technician. I'd been offered a direct commission and was now one of the lead engineers at a DARPA research facility. The phone on her desk rang. Evelyn picked it up, a smile already playing on her lips. "Hello, Captain Miller. What can I do for you?" I laughed on the other end of the line. "Director Vance, I'm calling to get your dinner order. Steak or salmon?" "Both," she said, leaning back in her chair, her voice warm with contentment. "And don't forget you have to pick up Leo. It's dressed like your hero day at his school, and you promised him you'd go, as Optimus Prime." "Mission accepted," I said. "Oh, and I finished the initial design for the Gen 6 brace. I'll show you tonight. This one has a one-touch vertical takeoff feature. You want to be my test pilot?" "You're an idiot," she said, laughing. "You launch me into orbit, and you'll be sleeping on the couch for a year." We bantered for a few more minutes before hanging up. Evelyn put down the phone and picked up a framed photo on her desk. It was of the 3 of us. I was holding Leo on my shoulders, and Evelyn was standing beside us, her arm around my waist. We were all laughing, the American flag flying proudly in the background. After everything, we had both found where we were meant to be. She was still a soldier, serving her country, just in a different way, fighting new battles for her fellow veterans. And I had finally found a place where my talents could make a difference, protecting the woman I loved and the country we both served. That evening, I drove home with a miniature Optimus Prime chattering excitedly in the back seat. As I opened the front door, the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. Evelyn came out of the kitchen, wearing that old floral apron, a smile on her face. "Welcome home. Go wash up, dinner's ready." In the warm glow of the setting sun, her smile was more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. Leo ran to her for a hug, and I came up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist. "Thank you for this," I whispered. "No, thank you," she said, leaning back against me. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Sean. Thank you for showing me that home is where I'm supposed to be." I kissed the top of her head. "We're a team. Always." Outside, the lights of the city began to twinkle, stretching out like a galaxy of stars. I finally understood what true love was. It wasn't about sacrifice. It was about partnership. It was about facing the fire together and emerging on the other side stronger and better than you were before.